I never thought the day would come when my own son would look me in the eye and treat me like a burden. Yet there I was, standing on the curb outside his gated home, drenched by the evening rain, clutching the umbrella I wasn't even allowed to open because he'd taken it right from my hand. "Mom, you need to learn," Michael said, his voice sharp but rehearsed, like he'd been practicing. "You can't just show up unannounced. You can't keep depending on me for everything? Depending on him?" My chest tightened. After all the years I had given up for that boy, after all the nights I worked double shifts and walked home in the dark so he could attend the best schools, eat warm meals, and wear shoes without holes in them, he had the audacity to say I was depending on him. I glanced past his shoulder into the warm glow of his mansion. Behind him, Lydia, his wife, stood with folded arms smirking as if she were savoring the sight of me shivering in the rain. Her designer dress shimmered under the chandelier light. It was her voice that whispered, "Teach her a lesson," though she didn't bother to lower it enough to hide her words. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't contradict her. He just tightened his jaw and turned back to me. "Go home, Mom. We'll call you when we need you. When we need you." The front door closed with a cold thud, and I was left outside, the drizzle turning into a downpour. My coat clung heavy against my shoulders, my shoes filling with water. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself that maybe I had misheard. Maybe it was just a moment of stress. Maybe my son wasn't really the kind of man who would shut his mother out in the rain. But the truth had been slowly building for months. And it started subtly, almost too small to notice. My name disappeared from the invitation to his housewarming party, replaced by Michael and Lydia host their first celebration. The family portraits I had paid to have framed when he was a boy vanished from his shelves, replaced with glossy staged photographs of the two of them traveling the world. Even my seat at the dining table had been shifted from the place of honor beside him to the far end, next to the pantry door. Lydia always smiled when she did it, pretending it was about balance at the table. But I knew. Oh, I knew. I told myself it was nothing, that families change, children grow, and I needed to let go. But letting go is easier said than done when you've sacrificed everything you are for someone else. I hadn't remarried after Michael's father died because I thought, why bring another man into his life? Why risk him feeling second best? Instead, I worked. I saved. I poured myself into his future. And now, standing in the rain, I realized that to him, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was an inconvenience. 2 weeks before that night, I'd received a letter in the mail, not at my small apartment, but mistakenly forwarded from Michael's address. It was addressed to the estate of Carol James. My estate. Except I wasn't dead. I remember clutching the envelope in my hands, my stomach nodding as I read about a refinancing application tied to the old family property, my late husband's cabin upstate. The deed was still in my name, something I had quietly kept when Michael insisted everything should be consolidated for simplicity. Why would a refinance letter be addressed to Lydia and Michael? I didn't tell them I'd seen it. Instead, I tucked it into my purse, the paper crinkling like a secret that might save me one day. A car drove by, splashing water up onto the curb. My clothes clung tighter, and I knew I couldn't stand there any longer. But I also knew something in me had shifted. I wasn't just a mother scorned. I was a woman who still had power, buried perhaps under years of sacrifice and humility, but power nonetheless. As I walked away from that gleaming house, my mind replayed every slight, every smirk, every whispered lesson Lydia thought I needed to learn. I had learned something all right. I learned that love without respect is not love at all. And I learned that sometimes the only way to remind people of who you are is to let them underestimate you until the moment you decide to strike. I didn't know then how soon that moment would come, but I knew this: I would never let them strip me of my dignity again. By the time I reached the bus stop, the rain had slowed. My reflection stared back at me in the puddle below. A tired woman, yes, but not defeated. I reached into my soaked purse, my fingers brushing the envelope I had hidden there, the one with my name, the true name on the deed. And as I closed my hand around it, a thought sparked in my mind, clear and sharp as lightning splitting the sky. They think they've written me out of the story, but the pen has always been in my hand. Before I reveal how that rainy night became the turning point of my life, make sure you subscribe to Twist Stories and ring the bell icon. Here, you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the powerful twists that bring justice. Where are you watching from today? Share it in the comments. You might discover someone else who understands your story. The next time I visited Michael's house, I didn't come unannounced. I had received a carefully worded message. Mom, Lydia, and I would like you to come for Sunday dinner. But please remember, things are different now. We need boundaries. Boundaries. The word clanged in my ears like a lock being fastened. Still, I went. Because a mother will accept even crumbs of affection if it means staying close to her child. When I arrived, the table was set for 6. Lydia's parents were already seated, sipping wine, their voices filling the dining room with stories of travel and investments. I took the last seat, again at the far end, away from Michael. "Ah, Carol," Lydia's mother said with a polite smile. "So nice you could join us." I forced a smile in return, but my hands trembled as I unfolded the napkin on my lap. I wasn't part of this family gathering. I was decoration, something old and frayed, included out of obligation. As the meal began, Lydia slipped into her role of the perfect hostess. She leaned across the table, brushing Michael's arm, laughing too loudly at his jokes. When I tried to speak, she cut me off with a bright smile. "Michael, tell them about the new expansion," she said, her eyes flicking past me as if I weren't there. I sipped my water, listening. Expansion? Of what? Michael cleared his throat, puffing his chest like a man rehearsing a speech. "Yes, Lydia and I are finalizing some paperwork. We'll be adding a second property soon upstate. It'll be perfect for getaways, and eventually, for our future children." My fork clattered against the plate. "Upstate?" My voice quivered. "What property upstate?" Michael froze. Lydia's smile sharpened. "Mother," she said smoothly, as if explaining to a child, "he means the cabin. It's too old-fashioned the way it is now. We're going to modernize it, refinance, maybe even flip it. It's wasted potential sitting there, unused, wasted?" My late husband and I had built that cabin plank by plank, our hands blistered, our backs aching. It wasn't wasted. It was memory. It was love. It was the only place left in this world that felt like ours. Michael avoided my gaze, fiddling with his knife. "You didn't tell me," I whispered. "There wasn't time," he said flatly. "Besides, Lydia's handling most of the paperwork." "She's good with these things," I wanted to shout, to slam my hand on the table and declare that the cabin wasn't theirs to touch. But something inside me, maybe the same instinct that had kept me alive through widowhood and single motherhood, told me to stay quiet, not yet. Later that week, I visited the cabin alone. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, the same as it had 30 years ago when we first unlocked its doors. I walked through each room, brushing my hand across the worn counters, the faded curtains, the photographs, still hanging on the walls. It wasn't just a building. It was proof that love and sacrifice could create something lasting. As I checked the mail slot, I found another letter, this time addressed directly to Michael and Lydia. My pulse quickened. It was from the bank stamped URGENT. I slid it into my bag. On the way home, I stopped by a cafe where an old friend, Margaret, worked part-time. She had once been a paralegal before retiring, and though her hands now trembled with age, her mind was sharp as glass. I showed her the letters. Her brow furrowed. Carol, your name is still on this deed. Unless you signed it over, and I know you didn't, nothing they do is valid. They can file all the paperwork they want, but the law is on your side." A strange warmth spread through me, part relief, part fury. "Then why do they act like it's already theirs?" I asked. "Because they think you won't fight back." Margaret's eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "They think you're tired. They think you're beaten. But you're not." Days turned into weeks, and Michael's distance grew. Phone calls unanswered, messages curt. Lydia, meanwhile, grew bolder. She sent me emails with thinly veiled insults. "We'll make sure the cabin is put to better use than just collecting dust." When I visited, she spoke to me as though I were a guest in a stranger's home. She rearranged my old photographs, packed away trinkets I had given Michael when he was a boy. One afternoon, I caught her whispering to him in the hallway. "She doesn't even know how finances work. She'll just confuse herself if you try to explain. Sign it, Michael. It's the right thing for us. And Michael, my boy." He nodded. That night, lying awake in my small apartment, I stared at the ceiling and remembered the years I had spent mopping floors at the hospital, my hands raw from bleach, my body aching, just so Michael could have piano lessons. I remembered the lunches I skipped so he could eat meat instead of beans. I remembered the time he fell ill, and I sat by his bedside for 3 nights straight, praying to a God I wasn't even sure was listening. And now he looked at me like a stranger. Tears slid down my temples into my hair, but beneath the sorrow was something else. Steel. They wanted to erase me. But I had one thing they didn't know, the truth, the deed, my name. And when the time came, I would remind them that I wasn't a shadow, fading from their story. I was the spine of it. The next morning, I opened the drawer where I kept the envelope. I smoothed the creases and read my name, Carol James, printed clear as day on the deed. My phone buzzed, a new message from Lydia. "Dinner this Sunday. Wear something presentable. There's someone we want you to meet." I didn't know who that someone was, but something told me this dinner would be different. And I decided then I wouldn't walk in as their victim. I would walk in ready. Sunday arrived cloaked in an autumn chill. I wore my best navy dress, the same one I'd worn to Michael's graduation all those years ago. That night, I had stood in the bleachers, cheering with tears in my eyes as he accepted his diploma, the first in our family to graduate college. Now, as I walked up the stone steps of his house, my heart pounded for an entirely different reason. The door opened before I could knock. Lydia stood there, flawless in silk and diamonds. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, her tone brisk. "We're about to begin." Begin what? Inside, the dining table was set grander than ever. Candles flickered in tall holders, and crystal glasses gleamed. A man in a suit I didn't recognize stood near Michael, shaking his hand. He looked at me with polite disinterest as if I were some irrelevant bystander. "This is Mr. Harper," Lydia announced. "He's a developer, and he's helping us with the cabin project." "The cabin project?" I echoed. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but Lydia pressed on, smiling with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. "Yes, Carol. We're converting the cabin into something far more valuable, a luxury rental property. Mr. Harper has already drafted the initial contracts. We just need the final paperwork signed." Her eyes slid toward me, sharp and expectant. I understood then. This dinner wasn't an invitation. It was an ambush. Michael cleared his throat, his voice carefully neutral. "Mom, Lydia and I need you to sign over your portion of the deed. It's just a formality, really. You won't have to worry about upkeep anymore, and you'll still be welcome whenever you like." My chest tightened. "Sign? Over the deed?" "It's best for everyone," Lydia cut in smoothly. "You wouldn't understand the complexities, Carol, but trust us. It's the right move." There it was again, that condescension. The dagger slipped between my ribs every time she said my name like that. I folded my hands in my lap, steadying them. And if I don't? Lydia's smile thinned. Well, the property is already under negotiation. It would complicate things for everyone. Michael and I would be very disappointed. Disappointed, as though I were a child failing to follow orders. I caught Michael's eye, searching for some flicker of the boy I had raised, the boy who once ran into my arms after scraping his knee, who once whispered, "Don't cry, Mom, I'll take care of you someday." But all I saw was silence, complicity. I reached into my handbag and touched the folded envelope inside. The deed, my name, the undeniable truth. But I didn't bring it out. Not yet. Instead, I offered a small smile, the kind that hides thunder behind clouds. "I'll think about it," I said softly. Lydia's relief was palpable. She believed she had won. She leaned, back in her chair, sipping wine, her victory already tasted. Michael looked down at his plate, not meeting my eyes, and Mr. Harper simply nodded, his expression unreadable. Dinner continued, but every word was poisoned with dismissal. Lydia boasted of renovations she hadn't yet begun. Michael joked about how rustic the cabin looked, how it was stuck in another century. Lydia's parents chimed in about modern efficiency and smart investments. Finally, Lydia turned to me, her voice sickly sweet. "Carol, don't you think it's time to stop clinging to the past? You've had your memories. Let us build something new." For a moment, the room blurred. My husband's voice echoed in my memory. "This cabin will always belong to you, Carol. No one can take it away." I inhaled slowly, steadying the storm inside me. "I suppose," I said quietly, "the past still matters to some of us." The table fell silent. Lydia arched a brow, smirking. "Well," she replied, "some of us live in reality." After dessert, as coats were gathered and guests trickled out, I lingered near the door. Mr. Harper approached me, lowering his voice. "Mrs. James," he said, glancing toward Lydia, "may I offer some advice? Don't sign anything until you've reviewed it with a lawyer you trust. These contracts, they favor them, not you." My breath caught. "Why tell me this?" His expression softened, almost regretful. "Because I've seen too many families torn apart over greed. Protect yourself." And with that, he was gone. I clutched my handbag tighter. Inside was my shield, my sword, my salvation. That night, back in my small apartment, I sat by the window, the city lights glowing against the dark. I thought of every sacrifice I had made, the double shifts, the meals skipped, the dreams abandoned, all for Michael. And yet, here I was being asked to erase myself. I opened the deed once more, my name gleaming under the lamplight, Carol James. They thought I was fragile, too old, too naive to fight. But they had forgotten one thing. I had survived worse storms than their greed. A notification buzzed on my phone. A new email from Lydia. "Attached are the transfer documents. Please sign before the end of the week. It will save everyone the trouble." My hand hovered over the screen. If only she knew. The trouble had only just begun. The week passed slowly, each day a knot in my stomach. Lydia's email sat unopened after the first glance, but I printed it anyway, along with the deed in my name and the letters addressed to Michael and Lydia. I placed them carefully in a folder, wrapped in a silk scarf my husband had once given me. By Friday, Lydia's reminders grew sharp. "We need those documents, Carol." Don't make this harder than it has to be harder? She had no idea how hard it already was. On Saturday evening, a formal invitation arrived. "Join us tomorrow at the Legacy Banquet Hall. We're hosting friends, family, and business partners to announce our expansion plans. Your presence is expected." Expected. The word stung. Not requested, not welcomed. expected, like I was some accessory to parade. But I went, not as a victim, as the owner. The hall shimmered with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Dozens of guests mingled, champagne glasses clinking. At the front, a banner hung, Hayes Cole Properties, building a legacy. I stood quietly at the edge of the room, clutching my folder. My heart pounded, but my resolve was iron. Michael took the stage, Lydia by his side, radiant in her sequined gown. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice amplified. "Tonight we celebrate not only our marriage, but also our future. With your support, we're transforming our family's cabin into a premier luxury property." It's the first step of many. Applause filled the room. Lydia beamed, basking in admiration. Then Michael gestured toward me. And of course, none of this would be possible without my mother's blessing. "Mom, stand up. Let everyone see how proud you are." The spotlight swung in my direction. Heat rose in my cheeks. Whispers rustled among the guests as I slowly stood. Proud? My hands shook, not with fear, but with fury contained too long. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the marble. The room quieted, sensing a shift in the air. When I reached the stage, Lydia's smile wavered. "Carol," she said sweetly, "why don't you share a few words?" I opened the folder and held up the deed, my voice steady. "This cabin you speak of, this so-called expansion, belongs to me. My late husband insured it. My name is on the deed, not Michael's, not Lydia's." Mine gasps rippled through the crowd. Michael's face paled. "Mom, don't!" But I cut him off, louder now. "You invited me here to humiliate me, to parade me like a relic. But let me be clear. You cannot sell, refinance, or modernize what you do not own. This cabin is my blood, my sacrifice, my legacy. And you," I turned toward Lydia, "are nothing more than a trespasser in that dream." The room erupted in murmurs. Lydia's mask cracked. She lunged for the microphone. "She's lying," she shrieked. "She's confused. She's old. She doesn't understand the paperwork." But I was ready. I pulled out the bank letter addressed to Michael and Lydia, proof of their attempted refinancing without my consent. I held it high. Is this confusion or fraud? The audience hushed. Even Mr. Harper, standing near the back, nodded grimly. Lydia's face twisted. "You can't do this. Michael, say something." Michael's voice faltered. I didn't know she—" "You didn't know," I snapped. "Or you didn't care." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. I turned back to the crowd, my voice carrying across the hall. "You all heard my son boast of our project. You applauded their ambition. But you deserve to know the truth. Ambition built on theft crumbles. Tonight they expected my silence. Instead, I give you clarity. I laid the deed on the podium. My name gleamed under the spotlight. This is my cabin, my husband's legacy, my choice. And from this day forward, no one, family or not, will strip it from me." Applause broke out, not the polite kind, but sharp, fervent, a wave of support I hadn't expected. Lydia's face burned crimson. She hissed, "You'll regret this." I looked her in the eye, calm, unshaken. "No, for the first time in years, I won't." As guests whispered, many turned cold shoulders to Lydia and Michael. Mr. Harper approached, addressing the crowd. "As a developer, I can confirm Mrs. James's ownership is absolute. Any agreements made without her consent are invalid. I will not be moving forward with this partnership." Gasps again. Lydia swayed, grabbing Michael's arm. "Do something," she hissed. But Michael had no words. He looked at me, his mother, with something between shame and fear. And I realized then the power was no longer his to wield. I gathered my papers, tucked them back into the silk scarf, and turned away from the stage. Behind me, I heard Lydia's voice break, shrill and desperate. "This isn't over!" But for me, it was. I walked through the hall, each step lighter than the last until I reached the doors. At the threshold, I paused, turning once more. This villa? This cabin? They are mine, and anyone who sets foot without my blessing is trespassing. The echo of my words lingered, sharp as thunder, as I pushed the doors open and stepped into the cool night air. The banquet hall roared with chaos behind me. Lydia's fury, Michael's silence, the crowd's divided murmurs. But I walked on calm, my folder pressed to my chest like armor. The storm had broken, yet storms don't just end. They reshape everything in their path, and this one had only just begun. The night after the banquet, I returned to my apartment and placed the folder gently on the kitchen table. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt light. The weight that had pressed on my chest, the fear of being erased, was gone. I boiled a cup of tea, sat by the window, and let silence wrap around me. The city lights twinkled, distant and steady. Outside, people hurried past, but inside, I finally breathed without dread. They had tried to strip me of dignity, of memory, of legacy. Instead, I had reminded them and myself that I was still here, and I wasn't done yet. News of the confrontation spread quickly. Within days, whispers reached me from neighbors and distant relatives. "Did you hear?" Carol stood up to them. She held the deed in her hand, right in front of everyone. Lydia's face was priceless. I didn't relish gossip, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction. For once, the story wasn't about my weakness. It was about my strength. Michael tried calling me once, his voice shaky on the voicemail. "Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far." Lydia said it was the only way. I just wanted to... I don't know. I'm sorry I listened twice, then deleted it. Apologies spoken after betrayal taste hollow. Instead of waiting for them to reach me again, I called my lawyer, Laura Bennett, a woman I trusted. She confirmed what Margaret and Mr. Harper had hinted at. The cabin was untouchable without my consent. "Would you like to add further protection?" she asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I want to place it into a trust. For Ethan, my grandson, the only innocent in this bitter feud. He had once handed me a drawing of the cabin with stick figures holding hands on the porch. 'You, me, Daddy,' he had said proudly. I had tucked it into a drawer, never realizing it would become a talisman for hope. By securing the cabin for him, I wasn't just guarding wood and stone. I was safeguarding memory, love, and proof that sacrifice mattered." Weeks later, Michael came to see me in person. His eyes were tired, his shoulders slumped. Without Lydia by his side, he seemed smaller, like the boy I once knew, though dulled by choices he could never undo. "Mom," he began, standing in the doorway of my apartment. I don't know what to say. I let him sit, but I didn't offer tea. Some gestures are earned. He fumbled with his words, tripping over excuses, blame, fragments of regret. Finally, he whispered, "I thought I was doing the right thing. Lydia, she said you'd be better off, that you didn't know how to handle it." I looked at him steady. "Michael, I scrubbed hospital floors so you could wear a cap and gown. I carried 2 jobs so you could have lessons, food, shoes. Do you really believe I don't know how to handle my own life?" His eyes brimmed with tears, but I didn't soften. "Respect isn't given by blood," I said quietly. "It's earned." You forgot that he nodded, wordless. For the first time, he understood that forgiveness isn't free. The cabin became my refuge again. I drove up one crisp morning, the air thick with pine and the scent of damp earth. Inside, the fireplace still bore blackened marks from decades past. My husband's photographs smiled from the mantel. I sat on the porch with Ethan, who had come to visit, and told him stories of the nights his father once roasted marshmallows here, of the days we built the deck, hammer by hammer. "Is it really mine someday?" he asked, wide-eyed. "Yes," I said, placing a hand on his. "Not because of greed or paperwork, because of love, because this place holds us together." And for the first time in a long while, I saw hope flicker in a child's eyes, hope untainted by manipulation. I didn't stop at reclaiming my own life. I began attending a small support group at the library, women who had endured betrayals of their own. One had been tricked out of her savings by a brother, another abandoned by children after years of caregiving. As we sat in a circle, sharing stories, I realized I wasn't alone. One evening, I spoke aloud what had been burning inside me. They thought I was finished. They thought I had no voice left. But when I stood on that stage and held up the truth, I realized silence was never my destiny. Dignity was. The women nodded, tears in their eyes, and I knew then, survival is not enough. We must speak, share, and remind each other that no one should endure betrayal in silence. Time has softened the edges of anger, though it hasn't erased the scars. Michael and I speak rarely now, and Lydia, not at all. But I no longer ache for their approval. Instead, I stand taller, knowing I defended not just a cabin, but myself. If you, listening to my story, have ever felt dismissed, if you've ever been told you were too old, too weak, too irrelevant, hear me now. You are none of those things. You carry years of sacrifice, and that is strength. You carry love, and that is power. And you carry dignity, which no one can take unless you hand it over. So I ask you, dear listener, if you were in my place, what would you have done when your own child asked you to erase yourself? Would you have signed for peace or stood for truth? Share your story. Share your voice. Because here, in this community, no one suffers in silence. And remember, respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Have you ever faced betrayal in your own family? Share it. Your story might be the light someone else needs. And don't forget to subscribe to Twist Stories and hit the bell icon. Here, every tale is a reminder you are not alone, and justice always finds its way.